Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Cybersecurity Weekly. Today we have with us Kate Labunets, and Kate is a postdoctoral researcher in the Faculty of Technology, Policy and Management, and Section Safety at TU Delft. Welcome, Kate. Good morning, and thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Amit, for inviting to your podcast. It's a pleasure to talk about some stuff that I'm doing in TU Delft.
Yeah. I mean, cutting through the Slack, I'll directly jump to something very exciting that you're working on. You've been working a lot on cyber risks and management of risks, doing a lot of research on that topic. And I've also read more about the H2825 Echo. Could you give us a glimpse of what is H2825 Echo?
Well, H2020 is short for Horizon 2020. This is a research program that found different projects across European Union. And specifically, Cybersecurity was focused on researching how behavioral nudges can help to improve the adoption of cyber insurance across companies and to create modeling tools that helps companies to understand what is the benefits of cyber insurance for them, how they can combine it with existing security controls and best practices that they can adopt and invest in.
There are many other organizations also. They are quite nervous about the ongoing cyber attacks, and as the cyber attacks are increasing, be it a ransomware attack or be it a malware, which is or an APT sitting in their network for a long time, leading to a big crash later on. And quite often, companies also or bigger organizations also think about if there is an insurance to take care of the situations. Like business continuity is always a challenge, right? So in your experience, what are the biggest threats for these big organizations that can make them uncomfortable in unforeseen circumstances?
Well, it really depends on the type of the company, its size, what business domain they work on. And if we talk about cyber insurance here, we need to be careful at the moment because if we look at the example of Maersk ransomware attack in 2017, they had an insurance against cyber risks and cyber incidents. But unfortunately, the companies that they insured them, they got a lot of claims and probably they decided to defend themselves. I don't know. And they basically said that this not petty ransomware attack was an act of war. And normally in insurance, this type of problems is under exclusions. So they tried probably to cut the costs that they would pay to the clients under the insurance policies. Like normally, cyber insurance at the moment is very interesting option how to transfer a part of your risk for small, medium enterprises as well as the big companies, but you need to understand very good your threat landscape and pick an appropriate insurance policy that would cover the risks that is most threatening, let's say, for you, or they're very expensive to be mitigated.
And what do you think about the limitations of cyber insurances? Are there any?
Cyber insurance has also its limitations. So when you looking for appropriate policy, you need to understand clearly that none of cyber insurance will cover penalties or fines from regulatory body because it's unlawful. So none of cyber insurance can do this. And if somebody promised, don't believe them.
Okay.
Another interesting thing that I found that it can be a bit unethical from cyber insurance side, but some cyber insurance policies they cover ransom demand from ransomware attackers. So, and I found this interesting example, like in 2000. I think 18 or so. There were 2 cases in Florida in the United States that within 1 week in 2 cities in this state were attacked by a ransom who basically locked the infrastructure computers in offices of the city council, and they paid ransom to the attackers because cyber insurance covered it. And it was about 600 in one case, 600,000, and in other cases, 480,000 US dollars. Yeah. So sometimes, so if you're not IT specific company and you want to mitigate this problem, you can consider having a cyber insurance, even to pay a ransom. But on the other side, it would motivate attackers to attack more and more similar organizations. Mm. So we really need to think about what are the consequences in this case.
Yeah, and another sensitive one, but perhaps depend, because you have a cyber insurance for ransomware and you consider paying ransom to the attackers, may lead to another line of business, which is the insurance companies, shaking hands with the attackers, and they're becoming the attackers. So, I mean, we're talking about risk mitigation strategies, and of course, risk transfer is the most favorite in the bigger organizations, because it's always good if the risks remediation gets easier for the organization, because they want to focus on the right things and the meat in the plate, and that is fair enough. But the root of risk remediation strategy is risk assessment, and that is something which is often a topic which makes people very curious. We have ISO standards to do risk assessments. We have ISO 27001, which is becoming really famous these days. Again, strategy to which is based on risk assessment overall. So how do you think, why should organizations think about risk assessment, and how important is risk assessment versus getting an insurance for your risks?
That's a very good question. Well, if you think about why would you need to do a cyber risk assessment or cyber risk management in general, here could be different reasons. Like you already have, if you're a big company, you already have some risk management company in place, and you want to extend it by cyber because you decided digitalizing your business, let's say, and you want also to cover this part as well. Then it can be because you're a startup, for example, and a bigger company want to invest in you or buy you, actually. Then the buyer, for sure, want to understand what kind of risks they are also buying and what is the risk of the investments. And we can see that a lot of startups currently in a cyberspace or in a digital domain, let's say. That's why cyber risk management is very important to them. What else? Maybe because you're watching this video, you're interested in cyber risk management, and it's already one of the reasons why you would interested and would need to do cyber risk management. What else? And if you want to consider cyber insurance as one of your risk mitigation or risk transfer options, some of the companies also require to do at least high-level risk assessment in order to understand also what is the threat landscape of the company and what is the risk of this of the client, how much money they would need to pay in case of cyber incident. Also, cyber risk management can be motivated, let's say, by the newly introduced standards like NIS or GDPR or some local regulations that require you to do due diligence when you do digital services. And for sure, cyber risk management and risk assessment is a good practice how to strengthen this part and build a good picture on your threat landscape.
Yeah, Some of our listeners are kind of business leaders. They are really good at what they're doing, but they are like the CXOs who understand the business really, really well, but they are not very comfortable about how to manage their security risks because that's something new. Coming in with information management, GDPR, and a lot of push from the regulation side, this has taken a lot of importance in managing the business as well. So when bigger organizations and which are totally focused on sales want to spend on cyber risk management as well, what tools would you suggest they have in hand?
Well, it depends on, again, what kind of regulation you're considering, what is general practice in your business domain, whether you want to be compliant or need to show the compliance with ISO standard, or if you're in America, probably it's NIST standards or cybersecurity framework. Or you have some local national regulations like in Germany, it would be BSI, IT, Grundschutz, I believe, some kind of security framework. So really depends on what is the geographical position of your company. If you're a multinational company, for example, then you need to take into account different standards. But if we talk about the approaches, let's say, or methodologies, like a general risk management framework, if we look into ISO 31001 standard, it consists of very simple steps. So first you need to understand the scope of your risk assessment, whether it's company in general or you have a sub-project, let's say within company, and you want to secure one of the departments or a part of your system or a specific system. Then you focus your risk assessment on this specific scope. And next, you need to identify your assets or so-called crown jewels. So what would be the most precious thing in your business that you want to protect and that would affect your business quite significantly if it would be damaged or stolen. Next, when you understand your assets, you can think of the threat scenarios or attack scenarios. What is the source of the threat that want to harm or damage this asset? And when you understand your threats, you do the risk assessment, you relate the likelihood and possible consequences of this risk. And finally, you have to pick up an appropriate security controls in order to mitigate these risks. Again, you would want to focus on the most critical risks and focus your investments on mitigating this risk down to the acceptable. And while if you found some bearable risks or the risks that you can simply accept at the moment and or keep monitoring if the level would change in the future, and then you would want to consider new mitigation strategies to deal with them. But it's also important after you did your risk assessment is to communicate the result of your risk assessment with interested stakeholders. It could be top management or the end users in the department that will be affected by these security changes. For sure, you need to take into account different parties and talk to them. That's, I think, a critical aspect of the cyber risk management program is to communicate with different people and get them on the same page with the result of your risk assessment or as a source of the security requirements, let's say. Yeah, and from time to time you have to repeat your risk management and update the results in order to understand, because cyber domain is very dynamic and it changes quite quickly. You need to be be able to react on these rapid changes, like with ransomware attacks, for example.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's fair. And that's for you guys then. It's very nicely summarized. The first thing and most important bit of doing the right or to no matter what strategy you choose to do the risk assessment, the first and foremost thing is to analyze what are the jewels that you are saving for your organization, identify the assets. And then the story starts from there, assets, and then find the threats to the assets, do the risk assessment, move on to do the remediation planning, and then repeat. Very important, and communicate really well. 5 important bits of, I would say, solid risk assessment. That's a very crisp answer, I think, Kate. Thank you for that. How would you recommend to the industrialists or industries to choose the right cyber risk assessment process for them or methodologies for them?
Yes, that's very interesting because we have plenty of different methodologies that were designed in order to help security analysts or even security people who has no experience in security to do cyber risk assessment of the projects. So we can think of the more national kind of security methods, like in UK, IAS methodology, or Margaret in Spain, as well as German BSI. I think Gronschutz's standard comes with some kind of methodology and catalogs in order to organize security risk assessment. And in my PhD, I was researching the effectiveness of methodologies like CORAS or security requirements engineering process that built on Margaret standard and methodology. And also the security risk assessment process that was designed and proposed in the air traffic management domain.
Yeah.
And they are all interesting and maybe quite useful if you master them. But they're also different, like CORAS, for example, is more visual based or diagram-based methodology, while SECRAM and SREP, they are based on the tables and use natural language in order to model threats. And really, so if you have a small project, probably you can use a CORAS and facilitate the brainstorming of your threats identification phase and have a more visual approach in order to understand what are the gaps in your cyber risk assessment. While the SECRAM or SREP, they can be easy to document different steps of your risk assessment because they use tables, and you can, for example, use Excel spreadsheet in order to organize it and have a tool support for your risk assessment. So that's why one of the factors is really the scalability issue. Let's say if you have a big project, probably some tabular-based methods would be easy to use, and you won't have a problem with scalability when you reach, I don't know, hundreds of the different threats, or you have, I don't know, several dozens of your assets to be analyzed. Then CORAS would be not the best choice in this case. You would deal with, you know, many different diagrams that you need to build. Another thing is also learning effect. So if you know some methodology or notation already, so it would be easier to start using this methodology. Or, yeah, basically you need to look into the existing practice in your company, what already has been done, and maybe choose something close in terms of this notation to what you already know. But if you opt to learn something new, fair enough. Well, another thing is also having a tool support, because drawing diagrams on a piece of paper would be not the best solution, because then you need to, once you need to update it, you need to redraw it. So you need to think about the available tools for these methodologies. And again, with a tabular, for example, it would be easier to use existing spreadsheet software. What else?
So we have Chorus for a visual representation of analyzing the threats. And if you are if you want to have if you have a bigger organization where you want to have more in-depth analysis and more number of threats that you're talking about, probably a table-based approach, so moving towards SecRem way of working can be another good option. So 2 options so far.
Yeah, that's right. So one of the things is decide between visual-based or tabular-based methodologies, taking into account that there could be a scalability issue. Another factor is that how clear is the process in the methodology that you're considering. So if you're able to understand and explain to another collaborator, that could be a good methodology to use if you have some doubts or you have a lot of questions when you read through the guidelines. So probably there will be an issue to explain your management or your collaborators, fellow security analysts, how to use and build your cyber risk assessment process within the company using this clear process. So another thing is availability of, let's say, knowledge sources like catalogs. So some methodologies, they come with catalogs of security threats and security controls, like NIST standard, the 853 special publication, I guess, that comes with a set of best practices, how to mitigate threats. Or BSI has a huge catalog, like 5,000 pages of different knowledge that they collect through different domains. Or there are some domain-specific catalogs or standards that you can look into, like PSI DSS standard, or if you look in, again, I worked a lot with air traffic management domain. They have the Eurocontrol air traffic management catalogs. It's only, I believe, 30 pages, but it collected the most critical problems in the domain and the best practices that they use to mitigate them. So for people working in this domain, it's kind of golden standard, let's say.
Yeah.
Yeah, and the last maybe is, again, coming to the visual aspect, is risk modeling support. You can take even tabular methodology and extend it by, let's say, plugging in some existing modeling approaches. Again, you can use take diagrams from Chorus, or you can also look into the FAIR approach, for example, and to organize the risk modeling part, even if you don't have specific approach within the methodology. So it's really about experimenting, let's say, and understanding what are your goals of this cyber risk assessment. Just to build a threat landscape understanding for your company, but do you need also to illustrate or to show that you're compliant with a certain standard? Well, depends on these goals, you will think about different methodologies.
Now, would you recommend that Cybeco has any offering for the organizations to take from, especially talking about the tools support for risk management?
Okay, yeah, in Cybeco, one of the questions that we were researching is how to use adversarial risk modeling approach and to facilitate a better analysis and finding better investment strategies for companies, taking into account the current threat landscape, like possible common problems for the companies in their domain, as well as appropriate cyber insurance policies. So we did many simulations using this approach with different company scenarios, let's say. It is at the moment at the proof of concept stage, let's say, but I hope like Europe will find money in order to tune it into industrial service that will help practitioners to choose an appropriate combination of security measures together with cyber insurance option.
The most important bit and the most dangerous, and I would say the strength and the weakness at the same time in cybersecurity world are the people,
Yeah.
right? So what do you think about the human aspects of cybersecurity over here?
Well, it's a whole new world, let's say, for cyber risk management. We definitely have to look into the human factors in cybersecurity. I think at the moment, the current cyber risk management approaches are mostly focused on the technical solutions of the probably technical problems. To some extent, they're trying to control the behavior of people that work with these systems. But unfortunately, like we are trying to enforce security rather than to build it in a normal working process of users. So that's why I think we need to look closer into the how people use the solutions that security practitioners try to propose them or implement in the system. And for example, I started to work with a new colleague recently, and he is one of the co-authors of the great paper that's called Shadow Security, like what we can learn from this practice. Basically, by shadow security, they understand the deviations that people or employee in the company creates in order to achieve the business goals, primary business goals, and maybe to secure the work depending to some extent how they understand the risks that they are mitigating. But the thing is, when you implement a new security control, like you impose a new security policy, sometimes people the normal working process is affected by these changes, and they're trying to revert to the normal process because they got used to this and they don't want to change their work. But you need to improve the security of the system, and then you have a conflict here. So you need to think about these possible conflicts and consequences of the security mitigations that you implement and introduce into the system. So, for example, if you decide to strengthen your password security policy and require them to use, I don't know, some 20 symbols password at least, or you ask to not two-factor authentication, but something that more complex compared to the normal way of working and authentication in the system, then you probably have an impact also on your call center or customer support, because people will start forgetting the password, and you need to instruct them what they can do in this situation. So really, when you think about the implementing security policies that affect people's or employees' working process, you need also to model and think about the consequences for end users, basically. And another, let's say, reason why you want to think about or want to consider and involve people in your cyber risk assessment is that among the top threat activities that, for example, Verizon, yes, they put in their report, still in the top threat activities prevail human activities, like you have phishing, you have misconfiguration, you have misdelivery of some confidential information. Also, you have a privilege abuse by the people within the company. So still, this is a big part of your threat landscape. and it's also people who are using your security solutions. So why would you overlook this part?
That's interesting. And perhaps that's a part of your ongoing research as well. So would you throw some light on what you're working on right now and how is it going?
Indeed, having a background in cyber risk assessment and studies of the strengths and weaknesses, like I said, I come up with this understanding that at the moment, these methodologies mostly focus on how technically secure some existing problems and solve existing problems in information systems. But you cannot have 100% security with this approach. There still will be some part that, let's say, affected or controlled by humans. So you need to understand better human nature and behavior. That's why, you know, I'm more interested into understanding the security behavior of employees within companies and how this behavior can be incorporated or taken into account when you do your cyber risk management or think about the security solutions to be implemented. So it's has like normally it's called usable security, let's say. So you do, like in requirements engineering or software engineering, you need to do also a usability testing for your security solutions. Yeah. And like the most recent proposal that we, together with colleagues, wrote is about the issue of the security updates. So very often we postpone updates on our devices because we have this probably concern about what is the effect of security update on my laptop. Will it crash? Will be can I still use it after the updates? How much time it will take? How it affect my normal working process, let's say.
Yeah, will it give any downtime? Yeah.
Yeah, downtime. And it's even bigger concern at the company level, let's say, because they have many devices in the system infrastructure. And they could be quite diverse devices, so different security updates in different time, different priority of these devices within the business process. So how all these things can be managed. So what we can do at different levels, like at the technical level, maybe with automatic patching generation and maybe controlling or testing the vendor's patches on the effect on your production process. And then we go in at the more enterprise level, what we can do at the management within company level, let's say, in order to have a more clear patching process, what will be the ownership, who will own this process. And it's important also to communicate this, the importance of this activity to the top management, that they also would support it and accept that there could be some risks or take into account these risks when they maintain the infrastructure. And the last level, specifically that TU Delft will focus in this project, is about the governance level. So what we can do at the cross-company level and regulations, let's say. What kind of solutions we can propose in order to help companies and government, state to mitigate and solve this issue, or at least to control to some extent.
And that sounds like a very vast topic, given that we're not only considering security and the, let's say, assessment of what level of security is required, but now we're talking about the human aspects, as in understanding the psychology of the people. What is the most effective security control which will be useful for the people? Because in the end, the consumers are the people. the strongest link and the weakest link in the chain. So very big topic to research upon, and very interesting one as well.
Yeah,
do you think,
a very good consortium to approach this problem.
That's true. That's true. Do you think this is this has a lot to do with understanding the human psychology as well?
About security patching? Yes, for sure.
Yes.
There are some papers already who studying the security behavior regarding patching or updates in general. And they published, so they found out like what was the concerns of the end users when they postponing these updates. Also, they are researching on the best nudges, how to motivate people to accept and patch when it's comfortable for them, let's say. Like, for example, now in the system, you can like postpone it for like do it tonight or remind me tomorrow.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. So next time when you get another pop-up, it's for the listeners, but next time when you get another pop-up saying, do you want to patch your system right now? You want to install the update, the security update right now, or you want to postpone? Think about it, how much research is going on in the background to make it easy for you. Not just about the timing, but how the pop-up comes up, and a lot to do with how you install the pop-up with the minimum downtime as well.
Yeah, also like recent study that my master student did is about, again, it's about understanding how people understand security solutions or technologies and how we can improve the risk communication regarding these aspects. So, for example, my master student, Veronique, she did a series of interviews with experts and lay people in a professional service firm about the mental models of VPN technology. What mental models are basically, it's a representation how people understand the technology or some specific system works in practice, and basically, yeah, it builds a map of the view on this thing or technology. And by having these mental models, we can understand what are the probable beliefs or misbeliefs of these people in regard to technology, comparing to how in reality it works. So what we did is we have a real world model of VPN, and we also talk to people and elicit the understanding on how VPN works. We compared it and found some misconceptions, let's say, in this regard. For example, not everybody understands where the VPN server is placed, whether it's in the internal network of organization or somewhere else, so how it works. And also we talked about how VPN affects the threat landscape and what kind of mitigation it can propose to the existing threats. And in this regard, again, there could be some confusions that have to be addressed in improved risk communication. Specifically in the company, some people could have any concern that VPN, for example, attracts the attention of the state, because if you're using a VPN, you could be suspicious and doing some suspicious stuff. Why would you use VPN?
Yeah.
But it can be not the case when you're doing it like using a corporate VPN, because it's normal stuff when company providing access to the internal network from a remote location for the employees. But still, you need to like understand these little pieces of this map and structure your risk communication accordingly.
And would you have any inputs on how, what should the leaders consider in choosing the right cyber insurance for themselves?
Well, first of all, they need to consider the results of cyber risk assessment and
yes.
Understand where they can, what risks they can mitigate with the current controls, or they have money to invest in the security protection. And what risks? Usually you want to ensure high impact, low likelihood risks, because having protection against risks that will happen once in a while, it doesn't really meaningful, let's say, or make sense for your organization, rather than mitigate the most frequent risks. That's why, yeah, look into what are the rare but very critical risks for your business.
So do the math first, do a good risk analysis, and to understand the likelihood of what you're trying to protect against, and what are the threats and how likely is the threat going for you, for your business. And based on that, you choose the right insurance for yourself. Quite well summed up. Great. Thank you, Kate. That was a very good session, a lot of information, and it was a pleasure talking to you, and hope to see you soon again.
Well, thank you very much for talking and discussing my research as well. It's also always a pleasure to share my knowledge.